Welcome to the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast. It's December 18, 2017, and this is episode 600. Today, I'm thrilled to bring you a great conversation with photographers Nicole S. Young and Brian Matiash. And I didn't tell them until we'd finished that this conversation was even more special because it's my 600th episode. I was just starting to think about what I could do that would be special for our 600th episode when Nicole messaged me on Facebook saying that she and Brian would be in Tokyo and had time to meet. I have a huge amount of respect for both of these photographers, so I realized straight away that a conversation with them would be a nice way to celebrate the 600th show. Not wanting to make it about me and this relatively significant achievement, though, I actually didn't tell them until after we'd finished recording. A little surprised by their reaction to this news, I kind of wished I'd mentioned it while we were still recording, as they were very excited to have been involved in this milestone show. During our lunch afterwards, every few minutes, Brian would say 600 episodes. So thanks a million to both of you for your excitement and for unsuspectingly sharing this special show with me. The audio quality isn't great as we were sitting outside in a noisy courtyard with people having lunch and rolling suitcases around, etc. But I hope you'll find the content of our conversation more than makes up for that. Here's my conversation with Nicole S. Young and Brian Matiash. Okay, so I'm really pleased to be sitting here with Nicole. Do you always put the S in? The Nicole
I
S.
try
Young?
to because Nicole Young is just such a generic, it can be just a very generic name.
Yeah.
So when I started writing books, I was like, I want the S in there because I think there's actually another Nicole Young author. I don't remember what she writes about, but I didn't want it to overlap or be confused. So yeah. And it also ties in with my kind of brand name, which is Nicole Z.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So Nicole S. Young.
You don't have to say it.
And and Brian. So Brian, do you put an emphasis on the I? Is it Matias, or how do you pronounce your?
I pronounce it Matiash. My family was so my family pronounces it Matiash.
Okay, that sounds posh.
Yeah, well, the reason why I pronounce it that way is that I grew up in New York City, and that's how my teacher. That's how I remember people would call him that Matiash.
Yeah. And
depending on how your stance, like you either can correct them. I ended up adopting it. Yeah. And that's how. So it's I say Matiash.
I've got you.
Yeah.
But either way, they're two names that I've been very familiar with over the years, and I'm really pleased that you dropped me a line to tell me you were going to be here in Tokyo. So here we are on a brisk December morn. Actually, it's lunchtime now.
It is.
But it's nice and cool out here, probably around 12 degrees. We're hatted up, scarves and everything. And the audience will probably be able to hear a certain amount of background noise, but we're going to roll with it and just have a quick conversation.
This is life. But
this is life here in Tokyo. So let's see. I don't necessarily, this doesn't need to be an interview, it's literally just a chat between the three of us. But tell us a little, Nick, we'll start ladies first, if you don't mind, Brian. So Nicole, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I am a photographer, obviously. I guess I'm kind of known for food photography. A lot of people have seen a lot of my work with food photography. I really do a lot of different types of photography, but my business is education. So you might be familiar with some of my books. Maybe you're subscribed to my newsletter, or you've seen some of my articles, my website. But yeah, I teach photography. I teach post processing. That's kind of my shtick right now.
And it's not your first time that you spent in Japan as well, is it? Right?
No, I was, so I lived in Misawa for 3 years when I served in the U.S. Navy. That was a lifetime ago, it feels like. But this is my first time back here. I guess it's been like 13 years since I've been in Japan, so it feels really good. And I never really explored Tokyo, so I'm really excited to be in Tokyo, staying here for about a week, and kind of exploring the craziness of the city.
Great stuff. So Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Well, I think there are a lot of parallels that you can draw between Nicole's, what she does, partly because we're married, and also, I'm a photographer, but a large part of what I do is surrounded around education and creating content. And my experience in this industry is a bit more frenetic or a little bit more checkered, whereas Nicole, you've been a photographer, you've been self-employed for how long now?
10 years, almost 10 years. Yeah.
And I've gone back and forth where I've worked for myself, but then I've also worked still in the photo industry, but for companies like Google, Sony, and Wacom. So I have that kind of experience is a bit different, but it's also opened me up to getting to meet some amazing photographers and understand the business side of photography.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'm really looking forward to talking a little bit more about what brought you here to Tokyo. Have you? I know you said you were saying as we were just chatting that you only decided to come a few days ago.
Yeah,
so a little bit impulsive.
Yeah, very impulsive, and I'll kind of tell the mini story behind it. I just about a week ago got back from a trip to New Mexico photographing birds in Boston Apache, and I was looking at and Brian and I almost exclusively fly Delta. We have our credit cards with Delta, and we have our mileage, our Sky Mile accounts, and I was looking at my app, and I was like, hey, I'm only like 10,000 miles away from maintaining my status. It's just not anything I usually look at, but I'm like, well, I worked pretty hard this year to get my status up to gold. So, and then Brian has platinum.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
and
so
I was about
like, go ahead.
Well, and I had about 9. Nicole mentioned that to me, and so I was like, well, let me look at mine.
Yeah.
And I had about 9,000 miles to retain platinum.
So I immediately got online and I was looking up where could we fly and how expensive is it to keep those miles, to keep our status.
Yeah.
And I was like, Tokyo, we could go to Tokyo. I want to go to Tokyo. I haven't been in so long. It's probably really nice there right now. And we'll just kind of walk around and do some street photography. So we totally impulsively were like, okay, we got to find a dog sitter. And we didn't have anything going on. It's a week before Christmas, we'll get back and we'll have time to do everything, got all our shopping done. Let's just do it and be completely spontaneous about it. So
have you got all of your Christmas shopping done already?
I think we're about 80 to 90% there, and we'll probably get a few things while we're here, or we'll just go on Amazon and buy the rest.
It's easy for me because Nicole does all the
shopping. I just do it all.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So photographically, what are you aiming to do while you're here in Tokyo?
I mean, I think as we were talking about this before, and kind of touching on when you asked us like what we do, we don't take vacations, so everywhere we go, we create photos. We get good photos, but for us, I hope it's okay to speak on your behalf in this one, but it's the photo we get the photos, and those photos hopefully will serve a purpose.
Yeah.
Either they'll go into the social media hopper.
Yeah.
Or most likely they'll be used for some sort of content creation that we will in turn productize. Maybe it's a series of tutorial videos on travel photography or street photography.
Yeah.
Or we'll use it as part of just a something. But we're here to create. And it just so happens that, we're in Tokyo. This is my third time in Tokyo, but it's actually the first time that I'm here for myself. The first time that I came here was several years ago with Google, and then earlier this year was with Wacom, and now we're here to just create. So we have the complete freedom and direction to just create.
I also think the beauty of doing a trip so spontaneously like this is that I don't have any expectations. I have, a few ideas in my head on a couple of photos I kind of want to get, including a lot of just a lot of people and a lot of people and lights and some, like maybe dusk shots or whatever, get up early, go to photograph the fish market. But there's such a, small amount of expectation as opposed to having a trip planned for months and months and then going, oh, what lens should I bring? What should I do? How much should I pack? I almost want to take all of my trips like this and just be like, oh, what do we got going next week? Let's just go on a trip to random place in the, world, because it's just easier to just pick up and go. So,
and it's a tax write-off.
Oh, totally. I mean, yeah, but this is, like Brian was saying, like the photos I use from the trip, I'll use for post-processing tutorials, which I do quite a bit of. I'll use for design. I think in design a lot because I design my emails, I design my books. I'm always looking for book covers and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it is a complete business write-off. We obviously enjoy ourselves because we enjoy our job and we enjoy photography, but it's also work, and it's a blessing and a curse, because I feel like we can never really take a vacation and it's self-imposed. We joked about family wanting to go on a cruise, and it's like, well, what would I do on a cruise? I'd bring my laptop and I'd write an ebook, because I'd have a good time, but I wouldn't experience it the same way that like a normal person would that's not a photographer.
It's interesting that none of us consider ourselves normal. and that to me is one of the great things about the way we are making a living. And I mean, we were going to talk, we'll skip on to the business conversation because we're sort of edgewaying into that anyway, or segueing into that. Have you found that there's, over the last few years, obviously there are people being laid off, photographers, and I'm doing the finger quote thing here. Have you found that the economic sort of climate over the last few years has been a negative thing for you or a positive thing?
I mean, for me, just taking it, and whereas Nicole said she's going on a decade, I've been incorporated for 2 years. January will make it 2 years. So I don't think it has impacted us because, well, let's take a photojournalist, a photographer working for a newspaper, and they're downsizing or they're going to more for citizen journalism, citizen photography. Their vocation, these people, they are photographers, so they make their money, their income by taking photos that get used by these newspapers. The photography for me is a means to an end. I use the photography to create products that hopefully, when combined with my sense of teaching and the way I communicate, that's the value, that's where people will find worth. So I think we're both fortunate because, as we were talking about before, it's one thing, of course, to be a good photographer, to know how to take a good photo is almost, that's not anymore something that you can, that's not something you can rely on. That's the
pretty
minimum.
Much a given now, isn't it?
Well, exactly. You're a great photographer. Well, super. That's kind of like the minimum bar. If you're not a good photographer, that right there is gonna cripple you. But to be a good photographer and also be able to provide value-added content, that's where I really put my focus on.
Yeah. I think we're going to probably keep saying this. We've been sitting here for like 2 hours and had a good conversation before this anyway. But I think that that's something that the three of us, we all sort of share. I know that not everybody that's throwing their sort of, that's doing the sort of thing that we're doing is going to be making world-class images. And I think that a lot of the time that's not necessarily something that people need to do. But I pride myself on being, I know I'm not the world's best photographer, but I also know that I can hold my own. And I think that producing content, for me, I find that again, this is really a business topic, but I find that being able to make photographs that then feed into the blog and into the publications and everything that I do and the education side, people then obviously for me see that, and hopefully at some point, at least some of them end up on a bus seat on one of my tours. We've got a bit of an announcement to make on that as well shortly. But it all sort of, it circles around, and it's sort of self-perpetuating. And this is why I still consider myself a photographer, as opposed to, I mean, I'm definitely not a commercial photographer, but the core is the photography, but a business is now revolving around that, and it's sort of feeding into itself. And I think that's how all three of us seem to be working.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the way I approach it is, of course, I want people to, in terms of like when you think of a legacy, not in a romantic sense, in a romanticized sense of legacy, but I'm more interested in people getting to learn about me or remember me as more holistically than my photo. I think that having a portfolio of good photos is great, but I also believe that today in this kind of hyper social, hyper connected industry, you have to think in terms of greater than the sum of your parts. So it's not just putting out good photos, it's also putting the best of yourself out there, and the way you teach, the way we are, the three of us, brands. We are our own brands, and I'm not defined by my photos, or at least I don't want to be. I want to be able to give people a sense of who I am as a person, through the way I teach, and also the way that I shoot.
Yeah. I think you do a great job of that. And I was thinking, Nicole, earlier you were talking about how design is a big part of your work. I love the aesthetic that you have in your
Thank you.
the way you design things. It all really comes in. Do you help Brian with his design these days?
Oh,
I do.
Yes.
It's tough because I feel like I'm good at a lot of things, and so I don't have anyone do. The only thing I have people do when I'm creating, let's say, an ebook, I treat my ebook, and I have experience writing books that have been published through a traditional publisher, but I write my ebooks, and I have them edited, I design them myself, I make them basically a legit book, and I also print them too. Usually that comes a little bit after the ebook has been published, because there's a little bit more work involved. But I've started indexing my books. I do all of these things because I want the value of that book to be really high, and it'd be really tough for me to hand some of those things over, like hand over the design, because I do feel like it's very integrated into my branding. Brian will come up with, let's say, what did you do recently? You had a sky kit, a big sky kit.
Yeah, a big sky kit.
And I think it was either that or there's something else, and I'll be like, okay, Brian, come up with your design cover. I'll look at it, and then sometimes I'm like, give me the Photoshop file. And I move things around, and like, okay, here, take it back now. Do what you want with it.
I sent her this product. She exactly what she said. Come up with the design. So I came up with the design. I sent it to her, and she made these changes that were at a fundamental level. It wasn't these big sweeping changes. It was these kind of small aesthetics.
Yeah.
I loved it so much now. That has become. I've adopted that as the core design language for the cover of every one of my products in my store.
Yeah.
It's my template.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
and the kind of one person, not one man show, but this one person show that she is, like, people, I don't know if they understand just how much she does. I think if you were to look at like her website, but you would think that there is a team of people behind it, and living with her and seeing just like, it's really amazing, and it's also in a way intimidating because it's not anyone can say that they sat down 8 hours in front of their computer with the express intent of building something, but whether you can do it well, I know I don't have that design sense. I wish I did, but
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Now, I take my design to a certain level, but I always find that my wife's aesthetic is the thing that takes. I'm not a brilliant designer, and I think even the finished product is it's definitely falls short of what you create, Nicole. But my wife's input is vital for me. She often stops me from going over the top. I will tend to try to put too much in or things like that, and she'll do the less is more thing, probably because she's Japanese to a degree, but it really helps me. I wish I was a better designer, but
it's a lot of work, and that's why I told Brian, I'm like, come up with a a basic idea
Mm.
to give kind of a starting point, because sometimes I have book covers. I'm planning a new software book for online photo in a 2 or 3 months, and I already have the cover created for it, and I barely started it, but I know, it's like, and I think I have another book that I'm going to be working on in the spring, and I already have the cover, I already have like the book design, because I really get excited, and that's kind of when I start a new project, that's kind of one of the first things that I do is I create the design for it, and then I just kind of fill in the blanks, because
I
that's
think
the easy part in a way.
that passion is part of what helps drive you, probably, though. I mean, if I tend to jump into a project and do the thing that I'm either good at or I'm excited about first. And that helps to build a foundation that you can then build on. I mean, we don't necessarily have to like the entire process. Luckily, I mean, I'm contradicting myself straight away there, because luckily, most of the time I do. Most of the time I really enjoy everything about
Well, you were saying that you like compose your own music and
Oh,
stuff?
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
That's incredible.
yeah, that sort of thing. I mean, and I'm doing that because it's what I like to do. I in many ways, the jobs that we're doing are like dream jobs. It's like the old Dire Straits song, the money for nothing. And they, it's almost like being a guitarist in a band. We've been able to build a business around doing what we love. And there are times, I don't enjoy accounting.
Oh, yeah.
I don't enjoy certain aspects, but it's all a means to an end. And I think that on the whole, I absolutely love the life I'm living right now.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are people who are listening to this episode, and don't get me wrong, I know we're romanticizing it,
Yeah.
but it's, for instance, the accounting, treating it like a business, and there's that, I think, a pretty, played out idea that we just jaunt around and take photos, but there's so much to it in the background. The photography, lest anyone think that that's how it goes. The actual photography is probably got less than 10%, and it's important to know. For instance, incorporating. Now you start delving into the more boring kind of like reality side of photography, and we share the same accountant, and she has our individual business credit card numbers on file, and my edict to her, my directive is, I don't care what you have to do, what you charge me, I don't want to go to jail. Keep me out of jail. Make sure my taxes are paid, make sure and of course, be a hound about my deductions, but everything that happens, I want it to be done correctly and legally. And these are the things you have to think about as a business person. The photography is just kind of the flavor sauce that you add.
Yeah.
But it's a business.
Yeah.
And we sat here earlier and we talked about some business stuff, the three of us, and it's always, ways that we can, because things change now at a rate that's faster than ever before. We have to evolving is, I don't think, even the option anymore. Now we have to kind of be on the forefront of things, and
staying relevant is really a challenge with what we do.
Yes.
And, as Brian and I are both in our late 30s, and I'm starting to feel that, oh my gosh, there are so many young photographers out there. Am I going to turn into a dinosaur? I don't want to be a dinosaur, because I know the dinosaurs in our industry, and I don't want to turn into that. And back in my day when I learned film photography, I need to make sure that all of us we make sure that we're constantly staying up with the new technology and the new software and the new apps, and not necessarily having to use all of them, but being aware of everything and the trends. And it's a big job with what we do.
It can be exhausting.
Yeah. It's really nice to hear that. I mean, it sounds as though, you've just confirmed that we all outsource at least one thing.
Absolutely.
And that's the accounting.
Yes. I don't even want to see it. I just do it. Don't charge me and bill me. And
my accountant is great. I mean, especially in Japan, I don't begin to understand some of the intricacies of Japanese tax laws. But this guy, he charges a fair amount of money, but he saves me probably more than that in we're able to get money back most years because a lot of my customers come into Japan from overseas. I pay taxes to the, like say for my winter tours, I pay taxes to the hotels, but I can't charge people tax because they're not Japanese
Exactly.
residents. I would never have thought that I could ask for money back from the tax man, but this guy gets me money back almost every year.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, and these are skills that it really is for me. It's the only thing that I would not attempt to try to do myself.
Sure.
It sounds like we're all in the same boat.
Yes.
Well, I know that both Nicole and I also outsource to our copy editing or
Yeah.
copywriting when we do books.
No, editing.
The editing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but she's a copywriter. We write everything. Everything is our own words. But when it's done, again, this goes to the whole in terms when we talk about business and brand.
Yeah.
When I'm terrified of putting something out, a product that is not received well.
Yeah.
Not in terms of I want recognition, but
Yeah.
the last thing I want is for my name to be associated with a subpar product.
Yeah.
And even though I know, and I'm okay with saying it, I consider myself an excellent writer. I enjoy writing, I enjoy storytelling, but I also understand that I can be verbose, or I could maybe use too many commas.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a more effective way of communicating a particular point. So there is a copy editor that Nicole used and turned me on to. So like Nicole has opened me up.
She's helping you in a number of ways.
Well, listen, when you have a decade deep of that kind of experience and also legally binding marriage, I would say that there's an obligation there to share. But no, to be totally fair, she turned me on to this copywriter who's fantastic, and it's if you treat your products in a business mindset, it's not just so much like we were saying, like it's not just the photography or even the words, but it's the body around it. Like you have to invest into the copy editing or like we were saying with the ebooks. We go and we register ISBN numbers. ISBN is kind of like an official legal. It's a number of coding system for books.
Yeah.
Open any published book.
Yeah.
One of the first things you'll see is an ISBN number, ISBN.
Yeah.
And then we also get our barcodes, which you take a
need
barcode
to,
scanner, but you put it on there, it'll scan and it'll show the price. We register the stuff.
Yeah.
So
Copyright. I register the copyright on my books. Like you should, like we all should for photographs. I'm not going to claim that I copyright all of my photographs all the time because that would be a lie. But the things that I feel are, I make my living through my books and my videos. I don't know. Yeah, sometimes I've copyrighted those as well, but that's where I make my living, so that's important to me.
And you've also you've got talking about business, because I think this is an important topic. You even trademarked your name.
I did. Nicole Z, and my name and my two initials is trademarked, and I put the little R next to it and everything. So cool. I felt that was important. And
it's not obligatory, but I will say that in some cases there is a superficiality to it that not in a vain way, but in when someone looks and says, someone who understands. I think that is like, oh wow, okay, well this is a legitimate business. Not to say that you have to go and trademark yourself.
No. That's interesting. I've still not, and I've been trying to make the time to do this for a number of years, but I want to do my logo, because I've got this little kneeling man that I drew 10 years or so ago, and I use it as my logo. And I know that I really should trademark that with the company name and everything. But that's one of the things that I've still got I've got a task list, and some things have been on there so long now it's almost just not funny. But that's an interesting move.
Virtual dust.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah. I think we all do. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Okay, so let's talk about. Obviously, we're sitting here, the three of us. We've probably got $15,000 worth of cameras
easily
sitting on the table in front of us. So, Brian, tell us what are you shooting with these days?
It's been now. I shoot Sony exclusively, and I've been doing that since the first Sony A7 came out mirrorless. Before that, I was a Canon shooter like you for a decade, but I shoot Sony now because, and now I would say it's as good of a time as any. The Alpha line has matured.
Yeah.
The camera bodies and the lens lineup has matured to a place where someone can make almost a parity move from any other system.
Yeah.
But yeah, I shoot Sony. I'm a Zeiss ambassador, so I don't exclusively shoot Zeiss, but I love my Zeiss glass. I like primes.
Who doesn't love Zeiss glass?
There are far worse companies to affiliate with. I'll say that
absolutely.
much.
Beautiful glass.
But yeah, I enjoy mirrorless, and I can talk on and on about why. But Sony is I wrote an ebook a while ago called "Moving to Mirrorless." And the reason, the premise in terms of moving to mirrorless was not, especially at the time, I mean, there were only like 3 lenses for the system. The reason why I put I backed that horse was because I look at companies and I try to understand what they're doing. And when I see a company that's trying to innovate and taking bold steps, they released that Sony, what was it? It was the first mirrorless full frame camera, but at an integrated lens. It was a 35 mm. I'm like drawing a blank on the model, but it's. I saw that, and no one in the full frame space was even thinking about that. So they came out with that, and then my deduction reasoning was, well, they'll definitely be coming out with an interchangeable lens system.
Yeah.
Which is what I was waiting for, because at the time I just wanted lighter gear. And the funny thing is, like, we're coming full circle because Sony releases all these small svelte lenses, and then the world starts crying that they want their faster 2.8 glass for 1635s.
Yeah.
And Sony releases them, and now they're just as big and just as heavy as any, the Canon and Nikon counterparts.
Yeah. But I mean, I think you probably have 2 of the cameras that if I was going to go mirrorless, I would be going probably this way. That's a Sony A7R Mark III, which just came out last week. Yeah. I know from my travels, a lot of the time customers will turn up more and more with Sonys. One guy just bought an A7R II just before Morocco, and I think he's gone straight home and got the 3.
Wow.
But yeah, they're great cameras, I think for me, if I could afford to run 2 systems at the moment, I probably would jump in on that. But I don't see it being too long before I join you to at least a certain degree. My biggest problem is going to be trying to stop myself from buying every lens that I want in that system until I give up the other.
Yeah. I mean, when I did a phased implementation where when the very first Sony A7 came out, I bought that, and the reason why I was able to kind of transition on what I consider my own terms, meaning I was a Canon shooter, and there were some lenses that to this day Canon is the only one that makes. For instance, the 17mm tilt shift lens. But because the Sony cameras support adapting lenses, I was able to phase it. But what's funny is, Nicole, I was a Sony artisan of imagery for a time, and Nicole, you were a Canon shooter.
I was at the time, yeah.
And I was trying to get her to switch to Sony, but why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, tell us about your Fuji.
Yeah, so I'm almost exclusively shooting with Fujifilm X series cameras and lenses. Right now on this trip I brought my Fujifilm X-T2. I also have an X-T20, which is it's almost like the same as the X-T2, just like in a smaller, a little bit more consumerized version of it. But I brought that one to New York when we were in PPE, and it's so nice. It's so small. Yeah. It's not a powerhouse camera. But anyways, so I have a very healthy collection of lenses. I have a few Zeiss 2-it lenses, but Zeiss unfortunately doesn't produce more than they have like 3 lenses for the Fujifilm series, and I think it's because the Fujifilm this specific camera, this X series cameras are all crop frame cameras, and which is actually one of the reasons I really like it. And the reason I like that is because I went to mirrorless because I wanted a smaller system. And the Sony cameras, I've tried them out a little bit. I went to one of their influencer events, there were some things I didn't like about the camera as much as I liked, the Fujifilm series camera, the Fujifilm cameras, but I don't like the fact that the lenses are, like Brian was just saying, they're going to be about the same sizes, because I was Canon before that. I also have photographed with Nikon cameras. I had Nikon for when I first kind of switched from film, I guess, to digital, because I was originally shooting with Nikon, like an F4 was my film camera back in the day. But the Fujifilm cameras, the lenses are, they can be faster, but they're still going to be a lot smaller. Like, I mean, we're sitting here, Martin, you have an 85 1.4, and I have a 56 1.2, which is kind of the crop frame or full frame equivalent of like almost an 80 or an 85. Yeah. My lens is probably half the size of yours.
I would say weight-wise,
yeah,
probably
definitely.
a third.
It's a very small. So I only brought 2 lenses on this trip. I brought the 23 millimeter and the 56 millimeter. Very, very small kit. I fit it into my tiny little Mindshift side path bag.
Yeah, and so, it's like in the bottom compartment.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
a tiny compartment. So I was able to put all of my check-in stuff on the top. Like Brian and I actually traveled very lightly for this trip. But yeah, I really love the Fujifilm cameras and their lenses. I'm really happy with it. They're really good about updating their firmware and keeping things up to date. I like that there are physical knobs on it. Yeah. Which kind of brings me to.
I love these knobs.
Oh yeah, they're just great, because I can just move things without having to look at it, or it's not all electronic. But I've kind of fallen in love with doing some underwater photography, and I don't know how much of the diving stuff I'm going to do. We've recently moved to Nebraska. That's partly why I'm kind of landlocked now. But the reason I got into it was because I really wanted to photograph great white sharks. And so about a year and a half ago, I went on a trip and I did underwater, in the cage, photographing great white sharks. It was one of the most exhilarating experiences I've ever had. And I want to do it again. And maybe in a year or a year and a half, I might do it again. And I'm going to try and see if I can use, because I was using Canon for that, because it's Fujifilm and housings. They have them, but they're not quite there yet, just because it's tough with all the physical knobs. So I'm hoping, maybe down the road, I'll be able to kind of work with the Fujifilm cameras underwater, just because it would just make things a lot easier. And then, but I've sold off all of my Canon gear just this last year, minus a 5D Mark III and a 15 fisheye that you gave me?
Yeah, my favorite, the
Funk Buster.
I love the 15 millimeter Canon, the 2.8, not the newer one. They're older, the original.
They don't make it anymore.
They don't. Oh no, they discontinued it. But I call that the Funk Buster, because if you are in any sort of creative photography, funk, obviously, if you're a writer, it won't do much for you. But as a photographer, you put on that lens, and all of a sudden the world changes.
Oh yeah.
And so that.
Bless the funk.
And you just gave me your 24 tilt shift lens.
Brian is getting a lot of goodies from me.
I wish Sony. I've asked Sony and I've asked Zeiss to make a tilt shift lens and a fisheye. There's a Sony, you can get the 20 millimeter prime f2, and then they have a fisheye adapter, but it's not the same. No. Oh man, I love that fisheye.
Yeah. Wow. Funk Buster, I like that.
The Funk Buster. Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. I've not used it. I have a fisheye. I think it's a Lens Baby fisheye. Many years ago. That's a lot of fun. But yeah, sometimes the gear, it's, there's this thing of it's not about the gear, and to a degree it's not, but it can definitely help to get you out of a rut. And if just a new piece of gear can sometimes be the momentum you need to get you out. And,
I always say it's not about the gear until it is. Because if a photographer, there are certain situations where it's okay, it is correct for a photographer to rely on the gear. And I firsthand, so I used to do some commercial like real estate photography, but not for houses, for like restaurants and little bed and breakfasts in New England. I'll tell you one thing. You may say it's not about the gear, but I defy you to find a real estate or architecture photographer who doesn't swear about the necessity for tilt shift lenses. And that's gear. I mean, listen, it's I need that. Or from a creative perspective, again, let's go back to the fisheye. Sometimes you need that kind of boutique kind of glass. It's not going to make you a better photographer. I don't rely on, you still need to be a good photographer, a good sense of composition. But, listen, gear is great. I'm sorry.
No, And I think that, I mean, if I look at the stats for my blog, I have some sort of musings, I call them musings posts and things where I get a bit philosophical. They sometimes run well, but a lot of the hits that I get, that I see consistently, are on gear posts. And I'd love it to be more about the, as David Duchamp, our mutual friend, says, you know, like the artsy fartsy sort of war, what is it, the war poet warrior. I'd love to be, maybe if I was David and can write the way he does, maybe I would be, but you know, I'd love those posts to be more popular, but the fact is that a lot of the time it's the gear posts that people will be over at the blog looking at.
I think a lot of it is, like, if you were just starting photography, what's the first question people ask?
Oh, yeah.
What camera should I buy? Because you have to think about it. You know, you have to figure that out. And then once you kind of get over that hump, then you can kind of move on, and that's whenever the good stuff really kind of starts to happen.
But I like what you just said there, Brian, as well. I mean, we're not, we have to be a good photographer. You can't just give the best gear to someone that doesn't really know how to use it and expect them to make great photographs. It's really us, it's our brains and our our sensitivities that make the photographs.
And reciprocally, you should be able to give a great photographer a toy camera with a plastic lens, and they'll. So there is an interesting dichotomy there, but I don't know. I believe that. So the gear posts, you're saying how they perform better, and I genuinely believe part of it has to do with the scale of it. When you think about the different, I guess, I don't want to say classes of photographers, but at the base, the widest population of photographers are generally the kind of enthusiast, ranging from the hobbyist, beginner, to more of the enthusiast, amateur, not even advanced amateur, like the prosumer. Those people love the discussion of gear, and when you start waxing on the philosophical, which I think is important, you are now kind of going to a completely different silo of photographers who, I would argue there are far fewer photographers who are as interested in the philosophy of photography versus just wanting to be able to take a good photo when they're out on the weekend.
Yeah, for sure.
And what if there's a camera body or a camera lens that will facilitate that?
I also think that there's another part of it, is that to a certain extent we all want to be, once you develop a passion like photography, we want to be around it, and a lot of the time it's easy to, say you've got an hour, you're sitting on the sofa with your iPad. What do you do with that hour?
Right.
What do you search for? It's not quite as easy to search for an artsy-fartsy.
That's true.
Yeah. So I think people will just sort of hone in and try to be close to the photography, based on the fact that it's easy to hone in on those sort of posts. And I also think that that we have an audience that will read hopefully most of what we put out. And looking at the stats, I think, so the people are going to still read the posts that I wish had more. I probably, if I was to really dig down, I would imagine that it's more like one-off Google visits that are coming for the gear posts, and my main audience is there sort of like throughout. So I'll bet I probably could find a little bit more about that if I dug into the stats.
Well, I mean, I think people seek out content that will help. It may sound selfish, but they seek out content that is self-serving. That will. So, for instance, on my YouTube channel, still by far, I mean, I'm talking about an order of magnitude more views than any other, is this one video I did on split toning.
Oh yeah.
In the Lightroom, and looking, I mean, this is several years old now. It definitely could stand to be revamped. But I would wager that kind of a video or post that either the three of us would do would perform significantly better than a video or a post discussing the merits of, or some philosophical component of vision.
Yeah.
vision is a wonderful kind of thing to romanticize over, but it's very difficult to communicate vision.
Yeah.
And we can take the exact composition.
Yeah.
There is a technical side of composition, rule of thirds or anything, the golden ratio, and then there is the philosophical, the romantic side of vision.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, having a conversation about the romanticized component of vision is more suited to this. The three of us sitting here offline, just kind of chatting.
Yeah.
But to put it in, type it out, or put it in a video where it's, I just don't see it translate as well. Because there's a component of, the body language and the intonation and inflection when we, and also the fact that the three of us are, kind of seasoned photographers who have been doing this for a long time. It's kind of like I could picture three of us sitting like in with brandy and a cigar in some like wooden paneled room and discussing it, debating it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I think broadly speaking, people want to learn about how they can become better photographers, and I think there is no nobler thing that we can do, especially if we can do it well, than to just help.
Yeah, and continue to share our experiences, and it's all good stuff. So, Nicole, what software are you using now to process your images?
I start everything in Lightroom, and from there, I use a lot of different types of software. I kind of like to experiment and explore. If anyone out there who's listening follows any of my work or any of the ebooks or training that I've created, you'll know that I use ON1 Photo quite a bit. And I've recently, probably within the last 3 or 4 months, started using Luminar and also Aurora with the previously MacFun, now Skylum company. And so everything starts in Lightroom for me. It's where I catalog and organize and cull, and then I process my raw photos. I know I get a lot of questions about that, about the Fujifilm X-Trans sensors, and not everybody's happy with them. But that's kind of that kind of talking about stuff like that kind of goes in line with the kind of the gear talk with me. It's like I don't overthink it. I'm completely aware of that, but anyways, that's a completely different conversation altogether. But so I like to do the basic raw edits inside of Lightroom, and then usually push it to. Right now, I'm probably using Luminar more just because I've been doing a lot of education on it. Give me a couple months, and I'll probably be using ON1 Photo a lot more because I'm going to be working on an ebook for that. But just to kind of polish it and add, some like extra stuff you can't really do inside of Lightroom.
I think it's great that we can do this and sort of still come back up to. It's all sort of like satellite software. You can just jump out to one thing, and maybe 10 years ago. Earlier than maybe 15 years ago, it just wasn't possible, was it? We didn't have anywhere near the tools that we have now. And it's all integrating so well together that it's a great time to be a photographer, I think.
It really is.
Yeah. So Brian, what are you using at the moment?
I'm very much like Nicole, shocking. I historically have used what's now referred to as Lightroom Classic CC.
Oh yeah. I've not been really following that.
Yeah, Adobe forked their products, the Lightroom product, into a more of I would consider a legacy, but just by virtue of calling it Classic, and the new Lightroom CC. Taking kind of borrowing from earlier what Nicole brought up about staying relevant as a photographer. So listen, Adobe kind of drew a line in the sand of where they see the future of photography, and they see it more mobile based. And so I've actually, for this trip, I've issued a challenge to myself where I'm only going to be using this new version of Lightroom CC.
Oh, okay.
Which is it's not quite feature parity to the classic version, but it's definitely 90% there for what I do.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this audience, I would reckon that your audience is very similar to mine and probably very similar to Nicole's, where mostly everyone's probably using Lightroom Classic. But in order to stay relevant, in order to understand maybe ways opportunities in which this software can actually benefit photographers. I'm sticking right now. I'm using Lightroom CC, which is the kind of, I'm not quite sure how well it'll work in my, but that's what I use. And then same thing, like there are certain things about Lightroom that you simply can't do certain effects. So for that, I'll go into On1 Photo Raw. I'm also trying out apps. I'm trying to see what I can do on my phone and on my tablet. So I'm using an app called Polar, which is Polar, but with 2 R's at the end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's an inch. I mean, it's pretty impressive. Both Android and iOS now support RAW. You can bring a RAW file on and edit it. I mean,
isn't that cool?
It's just amazing.
Again, a great time to be doing what we're doing.
It is, and listen, I'm sure I can already hear somewhere. I don't know where they are in the world, but they're like, but it's not a calibrated display. How are you? At some point, I just kind of, if I were a commercial photographer and I was hired by a company, yes, absolutely. With a lens shade or a shade on my monitor and controlled light, and I would be editing. But 99.8% of everything I do ends up on social.
Yeah.
Most people aren't running calibrated displays. It's running in an sRGB color space, and some browsers aren't color managed, and so really, at the end of the day, I want to see if there are things that I can do with the software out here that I can teach my audience, maybe open them up to different options. So right now that's Lightroom CC. I know you use Capture One, and I really want to learn, and this is something that our mutual friend Sharky and I have discussed. And I want to hear from you because you used to use Lightroom.
I don't use it anymore.
Right, but you used to?
Used to, yes.
So there's that learning curve that I am genuinely fascinated over. It's like, what is involved with transitioning over? How long should it take? What am I going to be losing out on? What am I going to be gaining?
Yeah, I'm curious about that too, because I've heard a lot about it and I just haven't actually given, I think it's just maybe because of the learning curve, or I'm just so involved and immersed into the Lightroom world.
I think that anyone that has become relatively proficient at Lightroom can learn Capture One. There are a lot of people using it, and it's certainly, it's not rocket science, but it's different. And the way Capture One works and the way it thinks it takes sort of really letting go of a certain number of things. And I did a post when I first jumped in.
I love that post.
Yeah.
Your Capture One post?
Yeah.
I read it last week again.
Oh, brilliant.
What's it about?
Thank you. Well, just when I first jumped over to Capture One, I'd been meaning to give it a try for a number of years, and I found myself with an afternoon that I could put aside to just give it a real try. And I found it difficult in some ways, and I had to make a few sort of sacrifices. There are, like we were talking about earlier, I loved Lightroom Mobile, but I sort of gave up on it because I wasn't using Lightroom as my main raw processing software or even cataloging software anymore. Another thing that I found Capture One didn't do as well was I used to have everything in one Lightroom catalog.
Right.
And Capture One, because it stores so much in the catalog, even just this year, I've got 22,000 images in my 2017 catalog because I had to split it up into years. And it's 40 gigabytes now.
Wow.
Because they store lots of previews and things inside the catalog. So there are things that I had to do, I had to change, but I just felt that for me, it was worth it because I just loved the amount of detail that Capture One presented me with from within my photos. I didn't realize that there was so much detail in there. And yes, you can bring a lot of that detail out in Lightroom, and I'm not going to sit here. I loved Lightroom for 10 years. I'm glad in many ways that I'm away from it because of the changes that are being made, but changes are fine, and Adobe is not a stupid company.
No.
So I respect their decisions and the things that they're doing now. But I found that really for me, Capture One has been, I've been using it for a year and a half now, and I've absolutely loved it. And that today, I will be releasing a video on the new features in Capture One 11. So they're taking it to another level. It's not perfect. I mean, there are areas where I still sometimes think, you know what, I wish the printing was a little bit like Lightroom. I print from Capture One. I'm doing all of my printing from pretty much all of my printing from Capture One. But it's not perfect, but I think that for me it's been worth it, and I'm still enjoying it. I've got no, at the moment, I'll tell you the other thing is, we've talked about offline, we were talking about the Nick collection, and I haven't actually installed any plugins or used any plugins since I've switched to Capture One either, because I find I can do it all in Capture One. I jump to Photoshop when I need to push some pixels around, but that's about it.
And that's, that's funny, because I believe that most of these plugins, Nick, On One, these all serve as more of an automated recipes for things that you can already do in Photoshop. I don't know, and I could be completely wrong, and I'm not saying that I'm right, but I don't know that there's anything that any of these plugins do that you can't do in Photoshop, just maybe.
Yeah, just a little bit, it takes a little bit more work and a little bit more understanding of the product, I guess. But,
right, and so when you say this, that you do most everything in Capture One, that appeals to me a lot, because I don't want to use a bunch of different things, but the thing that with Lightroom, what I'm excited about, and again, I genuinely believe that this is something that I need to be on the forefront of, is the fact that they have, with this new Lightroom, I can move a slider on my iPhone in 10 seconds.
Oh yeah.
I go on my iPad, that slider has moved, and then I go to my desktop.
That's stuff I do miss. That's nice.
And so, we can sit here and talk about the merits of Capture One's raw processor versus Adobe's raw processor. And I love in Capture One that I'm a huge split tone fan. I love that you can control the color in the midtones, not just the shadows or highlights, but the midtones too. We can geek out on this.
Oh, yeah.
I love that you can move panels around, and you're not fixed to everything on the right side.
Yeah.
And I love that they just built annotations.
Yeah.
Because I do critiques, and I always have to take the photos into Photoshop and use a pen tool.
Yeah.
Here you can now just annotate in Capture One.
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, I feel that right now, I like what Adobe is doing.
Yeah.
I've spoken to the people at Capture One. I've asked them, are they considering a mobile strategy? Because ultimately, I listen. They just announced again. Flickr announced again that the iPhone is the #1 camera in terms of metadata. So people are on their mobile devices more and more. Cameras on mobile devices are getting better and better.
Yeah.
So if we think about our businesses, going back to at some point, the content that I create is going to, if I stay on the same trajectory, that content the audience will phase out. It will be a different audience. If I'm not creating content that they will find, useful, then it's a problem. So
Absolutely.
I think about it from a business side as well.
Yeah. The last thing that my little list of things that I wanted to talk about is I wanted to ask you both sort of what the future holds. So we might as well jump in now and talk about the thing we've just been talking about offline, which is that you're going to join me and co-host the 2020 Hokkaido Landscape Tour. So I'm really looking forward to traveling with you both up there, seeing the work that you make there, but also just getting a chance to spend more time with you both. Are you happy about that?
Very. Yeah? We're both. We've been wanting to go on one of your workshops for years. And,
brilliant.
And so this is really great, that we get the opportunity to actually spend time with you and be on the workshop. I know Brian's really excited about it. When you showed us the video too, that was absolutely.
The little video that Rob did for us. I mean, the video was great. It really, really helped to show the atmosphere and what it's like on that tour. I think it scared a few people away because it looks cold, but it certainly attracted a lot more people. And so I'm proud of the video, but I'm also really, really happy that you're going to be joining me in 2020. So the Olympic year.
Exactly.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's right. And here in
Yeah.
Tokyo, that's
Is it the winter?
No,
No, it'd be the Summer
Summer
Olympics
Olympics
then.
are here in
this
Tokyo
year
in
is Winter
2020.
That's right.
Olympics.
That's right.
No, Nicole's right. I wanted to go on your workshop in the few months in the 2018, full or not, be damned. But that video. This is what we were. If people were here, they would have heard that. But what we were saying is, it's one thing to if you share photos that people can expect to get. That's great, and it's exciting. But the video puts you you don't just see what you can expect to get, but like you said, yes, cold. You want it to be cold. Anyone listening, you want it to be cold, and snowy. But just seeing where you stand in relation, seeing it, to me, it was great, and I'm super excited that the two of us will get to join you, in 2020 for this, because it's going to be awesome.
I'm just sorry it's so far out, but the next 2 years are already full, so we'll run with that. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And do you have anything else?
I wish that all your, it's a champagne problem, like I said, and I hope all your workshops remain full for years to come.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it takes a bit of getting off the ground for some of them, but yeah, I mean, thankfully, they're selling pretty well, and I'm happy with my life, and that's the main thing. So, is there anything else coming up that you're working on that you want to talk about, or?
I have a couple of ebooks and some training coming up that I'm working on. I have an on-one photo book I'm going to be publishing probably February, March-ish timeframe, and then Luminar is going to be adding the
digital asset management.
Thank you. Drawing a blank here. Very soon they're going to be adding their DAM, or the digital asset management.
Yeah.
And I think in the spring is kind of what they're kind of hoping for. So as soon as that's out, I'm going to be creating an ebook for that as well.
That's great.
So.
Yeah. So where can people find you when they? And I know that most people already are going to know about both of you, but just in case.
Yeah. So my website, or you can just search for Nicolesy. It's NICOLESY. Nicolesy.com will get you to my blog. I have a little online store you can access as well. I'd say the best way to stay in touch with me is to either follow me on social, or even better, subscribe to my newsletter, because that's probably my most active social media network. I have a very good group of people that are subscribed, and I'm very active with, and not overly active, so don't get worried.
Spamming people.
No, just enough. I like to give. I like to give to my audience, and I also, of course, it's where I also advertise and market my books and my training that I create. So that's probably the best place to find out what's going on in my life.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Brian, anything exciting in the works?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on a new, what I would consider a landscape photographer's guide 2, and I want to make one for Lightroom and one for possibly on one. I'm not quite sure yet, but we're now in, I think, our 4th month where our mutual friend Sharky James, he's a podcaster. We have our own. We started our own show called the No Name Photo Show, and so that's
the name?
It's I mean, that was the problem, and I
can almost imagine the conversation.
No, I don't think I don't know if I came up. I didn't come up.
We were the Sharky and I were trying to figure out a name. We were thinking of all these different, and finally it's just like, No Name Photo Show. And so
I'm enjoying it.
It's a great
it's a good show. Yeah.
I appreciate that. We'd love to have you on as a guest.
I'd love to. Yeah.
But you could you could just go to nonamephotoshow.com.
Yeah.
And then very much like Nicole, my website is matiash.com, Matiash. My newsletter, I always consider the newsletter to be probably the most powerful form of marketing, because it's like Nicole said, it's like your social network.
Yeah.
You control everything about it.
Yeah.
And my goal, it's been growing for years, and I'd like to think that's because we and Nicole's as well, we take a lot of care in what we share. So just go to my website, you'll be able to sign up for that. And then on social, I'm Brian Matiash everywhere, which is Brian Matiash.
Great stuff. Well, I've really enjoyed. We've actually been talking for over an hour, so I didn't think we were going to run so long, but that's great. And I really I was going to say I hope, but I know that the audience is going to enjoy listening to our chat. So thank you for your time today, and looking forward to traveling with you in 2 years.
Likewise.
And enjoy the rest of your week in Tokyo as well.
Thank you.
Martin. Thanks for letting us,
thanks.
join your party.
Not at all. Not at all.
So that's it. I do hope you enjoyed that. I had a wonderful time talking with Nicole and Brian, and I did, the audio quality wasn't great there, as I say, but I hope that you enjoyed the conversation. I have put the websites and, a few other links and other bits of information in a blog post for this week at mbp.ac/600. I'll be releasing more information on the 2020 Hokkaido landscape photography adventure that Brian and Nicole are going to be joining me on, hopefully over the next week or so, but by probably no later than January next year. And I'd also quickly like to mention that we've finally finished all of the preparation for our Morocco tour in 2018, and that is now available at mbp.ac/Morocco. So if you think you might like to join me in Morocco in November 2018, please check that out. So thanks once again to Nicole and Brian for your time and for your gracious comments. And I really did enjoy that conversation. Thank you very much too for listening today. If you enjoy this podcast, please share a link with your friends. Subscribe in iTunes or your favorite podcast program to ensure uninterrupted delivery. If you have a moment to rate the podcast or leave us a review in iTunes, that helps to keep us relevant in the huge number of podcasts out there now. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Google+, etc., and links to everything that I'm up to are at martinbaileyphotography.com, so do drop by and take a look. I'll be back next week with another episode, but in the meantime, you take care and have a great week, whatever you're doing. Bye-bye.